playbook each time. So going back to COVID, I was personally very fearful of COVID. At that time, I had two small children with, both have medical conditions, different ones, that had medical conditions that made me very extremely concerned about this respiratory virus. And I actually think that we had COVID in December 2019. That put my eldest daughter in the hospital several times. And so when we didn't have influenza A or B or all the things that they tested for, and obviously at that time we didn't have time to test for CV-19. So we had no idea what it was. I went, scurrying home and locked us down because I was afraid of this virus. But what I will say is, while I was locked down and I'm feverishly researching, trying to figure out what's going on and what to do to protect us, that's when I started encountering these studies, and I saw really counterintuitive or whatever, unintuitive recommendations coming out from these health officials, like stay inside, don't breathe fresh air, don't get in the sunshine, make sure your vitamin D levels dip as low as possible, make sure you're extremely stressed out and disconnected from any personal relationships and interactions that might actually not only strengthen your immunity, but your psychological and emotional well-being. And everything sounded off. And I'm not an expert, a medical expert or scientist, whatever that means anymore, but I just knew in my gut that this wasn't right. So even though I was extremely fearful, it started to open my eyes and my brain and my heart to start asking questions and really pull my head out of the sand and take a look at what was actually going around, and having real conversations with people, albeit remotely, to uncover the truth. And I think that equation that actually parlays perfectly into what's happening with children and in schools, and with this, I don't even know what you call it, queer theory.
Queer theory. Queer theory is the right name.
Okay, so queer theory. So it's all the same, and just really quickly, I call it, so the Trojan horse. Now that I've done this work for several years now, I see what they do. For example, like you said, Black Lives Matter. That was systemic racism. Then we had COVID-19, we had For Your Health and Safety, we had a novel virus, and we had that. And now we have, again, queer theory and the LGBTQ trans movement. Each of these are a Trojan horse. It's the same Trojan horse, it's just cloaked in a different theme. Right now it's a rainbow banner, pink and rainbow banner theme. But it's the same Trojan horse to usher in policies and procedures and laws, like you were mentioning earlier in Canada, that are stripping us of fundamental constitutionally protected rights, and trying to redefine words, terms, and ideas, and what society looks like as a whole. It's pretty terrifying. And I know, again, that's what your work has been focusing on. I mean, where do you see this coming from, and where do we go from here? Again, same kind of question.
Well, yeah, you're definitely perceiving what's going on correctly, that this is the same playbook over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. That playbook, if you ask me where it came from, I would tell you that the answer is that the people who developed this playbook were very familiar with how Mao Zedong took over China in the Cultural Revolution, and in the previous 10 years before the actually 15 years before the Cultural Revolution, while he controlled China. And so that wouldn't be going back far enough, actually, because Mao basically just kind of tweaked and appropriated it very successfully. He was probably the most successful implementer of a philosophy or a policy of conquest in history. But he tweaked and appropriated concepts from Stalin particularly, but Lenin before him, and applied them to the Chinese peasant situation very successfully. So this is a communist playbook. If everybody wants to get scared of that word, we can just use that it is a sophisticated insurgency or a militant ideologies playbook. And you're seeing the exact same dynamics play out in multiple domains. You see it in politics, whether or not you're a deplorable, Trumper, never Trump, whatever. You got these different divisions. Then you have it with COVID. You're a masker, an anti-masker. You're a vaxxer, an anti-vax. You got all these names. They're causing disease and death and whatever else. It's your fault. And then you have in identity politics, you have that you're a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, a transphobe, a homophobe. Jesus Christ, can you stop with this crap? Phobe. And I mean, even Judith Butler, who is like the fairy godmother of queer theory, with having to list all these intersectional categories, finally started calling it that exasperated, etc. She got so tired of having to list all of the stupid identity categories every time, so nobody felt left out. That wouldn't be inclusive. So you see the same playbook where you have a division of the good people versus the bad people, or as Mao called them, the people and the enemies of the people.
Right.
And you create a dynamic that a friend of mine calls hatecraft across the line. You teach people that are doing the right thing according to the government or the regime, whatever they say the right thing is, those people are the people. And they teach those people to hate the people who are not doing that. So if you're not getting on board with the COVID-19 policy or the environmental policy or the anti-Trump policy or the identity politics policy, you're some kind of a bad name, deplorable, hater, Trumper, maggot, which is a misspelling of maggot.
Right.
I think they pronounce it maggot, actually, M-A-G-A-T, but it's obviously a pun to maggot, like the larval fly, which is dehumanizing insect language. And I don't have to go through the whole exasperated thing again. But this is what they do: is they teach to do that across the line by a very specific mechanism that's going to make everything's going to make sense when you hear this, because all these different domains, politics, environment, public health, and identity politics, all are using this same dynamic, which is that the people with the power, the regime, the agenda setters, whatever, are saying we can have a better place, we can have more unity, we can have a sustainable and inclusive future, we can pull out of this pandemic and get back to build back better or whatever. But there are people who don't go along with us.
Right.
There are people who are holding us back: the anti-maskers, the anti-vaxxers, the racists, the transphobes, Trump supporters, the deplorables. Those people are keeping us from moving to our glorious future. So your job, if you're doing your part, is to hate them for holding us back, because it's not our fault we have to keep the country closed. It's the unvaccinated's fault we have to keep the country closed. It's not our fault there's all these racial justice protests. It's that there's so many racists that have to be reckoned with. And so they cause all this pain and suffering and calamity and even death, and get the people that are doing what the government says they're supposed to do to blame the other people who are not, and to hate them. This formula came from Mao. It's his formula that he called unity, criticism, unity. Start by generating a desire for unity. We just want a place where everybody feels like they belong. And then criticize those elements that are not going along with the new pressure for unity. And then we can arrive at a new unity on a new basis, which he called socialist discipline, and we call it sustainability and inclusion. It's literally the Maoist playbook playing out in every single one of these domains. So you are perceiving correctly that it's not, oh my God, there's a COVID thing for public health, and then there's the politics, and then there's the identity politics, and then there's the environment, and oh my gosh, it's not that. It's not that at all. There's one domain. There's one thing happening, just with a lot of different faces, a lot of different masks.